Good morning, boys and girls. Happy Monday. You might be asking yourself, Miss Burcham, why do you look really wacky today? What in the world are you wearing? Well, let me tell you. Sorry, I'm getting something pulled up on my phone. Today is Pajama Day. I don't know if you can see this. If you can't, I posted on our class story. We're going to be having a digital spirit week from Hamilton County. So each day we're going to dress up in a different way. And today is Pajama Day, so I've got my robe on and really any excuse to stay in my pajamas and my sweatpants all day. I'm okay with that. So today, hope you have your pajamas on. It is Pajama Day. Tomorrow, sports team day. Wednesday, wear a hat day. Thursday, Hamilton County School Blue Day, so wear blue. And Friday, School Spirit Day. You want to rock your East Ridge stuff. So this, like I said, is posted on Class Dojo on our story. So feel free to participate in Digital Spirit Week. And if you want to shoot out a picture to myself or Mr. Barry of what you're wearing to support Spirit Week, go for it. So that now explains why I have my robe, and hopefully that's okay with you. I wanted to start by talking about our exit slips from last week. So we ended on Friday with a paragraph writing activity where you were supposed to choose a character trait from the story Hercules Hercules Quest, and write a paragraph proving how that character had the trait. So if I go back to all the things a good paragraph needs, I would say in every paragraph I read, which I received about 8 maybe, everybody had a great topic sentence. You told me what your paragraph was going to be about. You let me know the character. It was great. Text evidence. I also saw awesome text evidence, things you pulled from the story, sometimes in quotation marks when you copied from the text, and other times you summarized it in your own words, which was fabulous. Here's where I think we started to struggle. Explanation. So I had several paragraphs turned in that were just text evidence. Like Hercules is brave, he defeated this monster, he blah, 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 he blah, blah, blah. And using examples from the story, just listed ways he was brave. That's great. However, you're missing something really important. I want to know your thinking, your thoughts, your explanation, because it's really easy to copy things straight from the text. A good writer is able to explain how those pieces of evidence support their thinking. So if I were to go back to the paragraph we wrote together on Friday, let's take a look at it. It says, in the Greek myth Hercules Quest, the goddess Hera is an evil character. For example, she dropped serpents into Hercules' cradle when he was a baby. So that's straight from the text. That's my evidence. Here's an example of what an explanation looks like. This shows her evil side because she was trying to hurt or kill a baby. So what I did is I used that piece of text evidence and then I explained it. I explained why putting the serpents into the cradle is an evil thing to do. It supports my thinking. So if you were saying he was brave because he fought the lion, I then needed a sentence explaining that. So fighting a lion is a brave thing to do because lions are very dangerous animals and he could have gotten hurt. Do you see how that's explaining your thinking? Or Hera is mean because she wanted to separate Zeus and Hercules. That would be a piece of text evidence. And then to explain that, you would need to say a father-son relationship is really important. So it was very mean for her to try to split that up. Some sentence where you are explaining how the text evidence supports your thinking. So if you're someone who just wrote a paragraph with all that text evidence and you didn't explain it, maybe go back and watch my last video again and see if you can improve your paragraph. Okay, the other thing that was missing on several of the paragraphs that were turned in was closing sentence. That's kind of an easy one. I think some people just forgot. So make sure at the end of your paragraph, you always put a closing sentence to wrap up your paragraph. All of these things show that Hercules is brave. In these ways, Hercules proves to be a brave character. Some type of sentence to wrap up your paragraph. I did see transition words. awesome, and overall conventions were correct. Every paragraph was indented. There were a few minor spelling errors, etc., but overall, great job. So the two things that I think we need to work on for next time we do some writing are the explanations and a closing sentence. So we'll do more of that this week and later on, and hopefully you can improve for next time. But today, enough about last week. We're going to switch to a non-fiction passage this week. So last week we read fiction. We read the story of Hercules' quest, that Greek myth. Now we're going to read a non-fiction text. We're going to read the story this week, Hurricanes, Earth's Mightiest Storms. This is what the title page looks like. So if you want to open your Journeys textbook, this is on page 320. And let me explain to you a little bit of why I chose this text, because I chose it for a reason. I didn't close the book, close my eyes, and just open to a random page. I selected this text on purpose because I got back our Benchmark 3 data, and I'll be sharing more with you about that later on. However, one of the things that we struggled with or did the weakest on were the questions that had to do with scientific texts. So we did pretty well on our fiction stories, okay? But there were some texts on the benchmark that were scientific informational texts. Those were the ones that we did the poorest on for the questions. So I looked through the Journeys textbook and I found this article about hurricanes, and I thought, perfect. Informational text, it's scientific topic. This is going to be great. So we're going to be working on this week. To help us with this skill, to help us with reading nonfiction, reading scientific text, and making sure we understand what we're reading. So, hurricanes. If we were all together in the classroom, I would start by saying, what do you guys know about hurricanes? And I'm sure I'd have hands popping up everywhere telling me things you know about hurricanes. Hurricanes are very common where I used to live. I'm from Florida, and I lived right by the beach when I was growing up. So, usually a couple times a year, we would have hurricane warnings where we would know that these big storms were coming. And it's kind of hard to know how dangerous they're going to be. Sometimes they would be so dangerous that my family and I had to get in the car and drive somewhere else to be safe. Other times, my dad would put wood up on the windows of our house so that if the wind came and branches fell and they hit our house, that there would be wood blocking the windows so that it wouldn't break glass in our homes. Sometimes the storm would come and we would stay in our house with the wood over the windows, and we'd kind of have to hide in a safe spot. Other times after the storm, our electricity would be cut off because of the damage from the storm, and we would have no electricity for a few days. It was crazy. And there would be damage. Sometimes people's homes were completely destroyed. At my house, thankfully, we never had that. Mostly we just had branches in the yard and parts of our trees that fell. So I'm very grateful and very blessed. But anyway, this is a topic that I have a lot of background knowledge on because hurricanes are formed over water, and so they hit places near beaches, and that's somewhere where I used to live. Perhaps you know other things about hurricanes. Maybe you're a hurricane expert. I'm not sure. But hopefully this week you're going to learn something about these powerful storms as we read it together. So before we start reading, here's what I want for you to do. I want you to take a picture walk of this text. We've talked about this so many times, but informational texts have these things called text features. They are what the author includes to help us better understand what he's trying to teach us. Informational text, scientific text, if it was just words, we could be really confused. It helps you understand it better when there are pictures and diagrams and labels and captions, and looking at those things help you better understand the topic. So let's go ahead and look on page 322 and 323. I want to give you just a second to check out the text features you see on these two pages. What do you notice? So I'm going to give you a second to look. I'm hoping you're noticing a heading. The heading says, The Making of a Hurricane. So what do you think this section might be about? The making of a hurricane. So I'm thinking it's going to be about kind of how hurricanes are made, or maybe how they're formed, where they come from. I hope you also notice that there are words that are highlighted in yellow. These are really important kind of vocab words for the story. Now, these words highlighted in yellow, if you use your Journeys book and go all the way to the back, there's a tool called a glossary. And in the glossary, it will tell you what these words mean. So I'm not going to teach them to you because you all are skilled 4th grade readers and you can use the glossary. For example, the word whirling, it's the second word. When I flip to the glossary, it says to spin quickly. So whirling means to spin really, really fast. So if you come to those words and you don't know what they are, flip back to the glossary. Okay, I hope you're also noticing these images. This first one looks like a satellite image from space, and I see the clouds. And what do you notice about the shape of a hurricane from this picture? It looks kind of circular, doesn't it? And then what about on page 323? I love this one. This is a diagram with labels. So it's showing us the different things. There's clouds, and then warm air. I see from the arrow, it looks like it's going up. Then rain. Hope you know what that is. Okay, so from this, I can kind of see there's warm air going up, and then it kind of has these arrows like it's spinning. And there's a caption. Boys and girls, we went over this so many times in class. If I ever point to a picture or a diagram and I say, tell me what you can learn from this. If you just start making stuff up, you are missing the point. Always look for a caption. A caption is going to tell you what you can learn from the picture or the diagram. So this one says birth of a hurricane. Warm, moist air flows into a low pressure area. As the air rises and condenses into clouds, more warm air is drawn over the surface of the ocean. It spirals upwards, traveling counterclockwise. Clusters of thunderstorms form. So everything I just read in that caption, I can see in this diagram. I see the air rising. It says it in the diagram, warm air. Then it says it condenses into clouds. We see the clouds, okay? And then it says they're over the surface of the ocean. I see the ocean, and it talks about spiraling. Those are what those arrows are showing. So the caption really helps us better understand that diagram. All right, if you go ahead and keep flipping, I'm not going to go over every text feature, but if you go ahead and hit pause to my video and take a minute and look at each text feature. Don't read the text yet, but carefully read the captions, look at the diagrams, look at the labels. Before we even read the text, we're going to look at the text features to kind of give us a preview of what the passage is about. So if you go ahead and hit pause to my video now and flip all the way through the text to the page 329, the last page. All right, I hope you have gone and looked at all those text features, even without me. You can be independent learners and do that. We're going to get started with what we're doing today. Today, we're only going to be looking at the section, The Making of a Hurricane. It's only 4 pages, okay? 322 to 325. And we're going to kind of take this really big section and chunk it up into smaller pieces to make sure we understand what's happening. So I've made this sort of simple chart, and it says at the top, the heading, The Making of a Hurricane. We remember that headings tell us what the section's going to be about. And when we're trying to find the most important information, it's a good idea to take this heading and change it into a question. So that way we can always be thinking about that question. And when we find an answer to that question, it's probably an important detail in the section because it matches our heading, which is what the section's mostly about. So the section's called The Making of a Hurricane. So what could I change to make that a question that focuses me on what's most important? So the section's going to be about how hurricanes are made or formed. So what if I change it to how are hurricanes made or how are hurricanes formed? So I will be looking for the information of how that happens or the causes. If you want to think about cause and effect, what causes a hurricane or what forms a hurricane. So I'm going to change it to how are hurricanes made or formed? Maybe formed might be better. How are hurricanes formed? So that's my focusing question. Now, as I read each page in this section, when I find a fact, an important detail or an important fact that answers that question about how they are formed, how they are made, I'm going to jot it down here. After each page, we're going to stop and summarize the page to make sure we understand what we're reading. I think that's what happens with scientific text sometimes. Sometimes we just read it start to finish and we don't stop and think about and make sure we understand what we're reading. So at the end, we just read a bunch of facts, but it didn't really click in our brains. So if we slow down and stop after each page and look at our important details and then kind of summarize, we might be able to fully understand how a hurricane forms. So let's try it out together. Let's see if you can understand what I'm trying to show you today. So our first page, 322, the making of a hurricane. Let's see what it says. Great whirling storms roar out of the oceans in many parts of the world. They are called by several names. Hurricane, typhoon, and cyclone are the three most familiar ones. But no matter what they are called, they are all the same sort of storm. So have we read anything about how they're formed? No. So I could see if we were in the classroom, a lot of people saying, oh, an important detail. Hurricanes go by different names, cyclones and typhoons. Yes, that's true. That's a very interesting fact. But it's not important to our section. Our section is about how they're formed, how they're made. And knowing that they have different names is really interesting, but it doesn't tell me anything about how they're formed. Okay, so let's keep reading. They are born the same way. In tropical waters. They develop the same way, feeding on warm, moist air. Okay, I think we just learned something. How are they formed? Well, it says they're formed in tropical waters. So I'm going to write in tropical waters. And it says that they develop the same way, feeding on warm, moist air. They feed on warm, moist air. Moist means wet. So think about it. That kind of makes sense. If they're forming over waters, the air above water is going to be kind of wet. And tropical, think about like the palm trees swaying, okay? Those are warm places. So it makes sense that they have warm because they're over tropical waters and moist because they're over waters. Their air is going to be warm and moist, okay? Let's keep going. They do the same kind of damage, both ashore and at sea. They do damage. Does that tell me how they're formed? Nope. Is it interesting to learn about the kind of damage and destruction hurricanes do? Yes, but it doesn't tell me how they're formed. Other storms may cover a bigger area or have higher winds, but none can match both the size and fury of hurricanes. They are Earth's mightiest storms. Nothing else about how they're formed. Like all storms, they take place in the atmosphere, the envelope of air that surrounds the earth and presses on its surface. The pressure at any one place is always changing. There are days when air is sinking and the atmosphere presses harder on the surface. These are times of high pressure. There are days when a lot of air is rising and the atmosphere does not press down as hard. So this is telling me information about the atmosphere and what air pressure is. Does it tell me anything about a hurricane? Not really. It's just telling me what high pressure means and what low pressure means, but it hasn't told me what forms a hurricane. So let's read the last sentence. These are times of low pressure. Low pressure areas over warm oceans give birth to hurricanes. Ding, 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 ding. So what did we learn about how hurricanes are formed? Low pressure areas over warm oceans, okay? Low pressure areas over warm oceans. Now, you know what's interesting? All of our important facts from page 322 kind of go together. Tropical waters, warm, moist air, warm oceans. Do you see how it's talking about warm and water? Those are repeated, so it must be important. So how can I summarize how hurricanes are formed from this page? I'm thinking I might be able to say hurricanes form in low pressure areas over warm or tropical oceans. It kind of tells me all the important things, but I'm putting it in my own words. So I'm going to say hurricanes form in low pressure areas over warm tropical waters. So this page, oops, forgot my S, hurricanes. I learned where they're formed, right? They're formed over the water, warm water. So not by Antarctica, not by where it's really cold, where the polar bears live. It has to be warm tropical water in a low pressure area, which means that the air is rising and it's not pushing down on the surface of the earth. Okay, so let's look at page 323 and see what we can learn from this page. No one knows exactly what happens to start these storms, but when conditions are right, warm, moist air is set in motion. It begins to rise rapidly from the surface of the ocean in a low pressure area. So we've already said it forms in a low pressure area over the warm waters. So what happens? How is it formed? This warm, moist air goes up. It starts to rise. You can see that in the diagram. Now do you see why diagrams are important? After you read a fact, find where it is in the diagram. We see the warm air and the arrows pointing up. So I'm going to jot that for an important detail. Warm, moist air rises. Okay, so after the air rises, let's see what happens. Like water in a hose, the air flows where there is more pressure to where there is less pressure. And so air over the surface of the ocean flows into a lower pressure area, picking up moisture as it travels. This warm, moist air soars upward. It's what we already said. The warm air is going up. Uh-oh, I'm frozen here. My computer is having an issue. Let's see if I can get this to work again. I am frozen, making a silly face. I'm going to keep going and see if it works. All right. As the air rises above the earth, it cools. Okay, so the warm, moist air rises and then the air cools down. The cooling causes moisture to condense into tiny droplets of water that form clouds. Okay, so when the air cools, it forms a cloud. So air cools and forms clouds. As the moisture condenses, it gives off heat. Heat is one kind of energy. It is the energy that powers the storm. The clouds are the source of the storm's rain. Okay, so what did we learn here? So the air is going to form clouds, and then what do we learn after we read about the clouds? That heat is given off, and that is the energy that powers the storm. I'm thinking that might be important. So heat is given off, and it powers the storm. All right, my computer is still frozen, so I hope you all can see what I'm doing. Technical difficulties. All right, so we have warm, moist air rises, the air cools and forms cloud, and then heat is given off and it powers the storm. So we've got this low pressure area, there's warm, moist air over the tropical waters, and what happens? So now we're going to summarize what happens in this section. So I'm going to say as warm, moist air rises, it forms clouds and gives off heat, which powers the hurricane. All right. So I took my important details and I turned them into a summary sentence that tells me what's most important on this page. So far, we always want to stop and ask ourselves, do we understand what's happening? So we're trying to learn about how a hurricane forms. So let's read our summaries and see if it makes sense. Hurricanes form in a low pressure area over warm tropical waters. As warm, moist air rises, it forms clouds and gives off heat, which powers the hurricane. So far, it makes sense, and I can check to see if I understand it by looking at that diagram on page 323, and it matches what I've written. I see all the steps. So I'm going to challenge you. On your own, would you read page 324 and 325 and do exactly what we just did together? Jot down the important facts that you're learning about the formation of hurricanes, how they're formed, where it forms, what forms, and after you do that, after you jot down the important details straight from the text, summarize it. Write a sentence or two about each page telling me about the formation of a hurricane. So by the end, you should have 4, 5, 6 sentences total, including the 2 we just did together, that tell you about how a hurricane is formed. So as your exit slip, what I'm looking for are your sentences. It would be great if you had a chart kind of like mine, if I could see what you jotted down as your important details and then your sentence summary. So go ahead and send me those today. I hope my videos worked. I'm a little bit nervous about it not working today, so we will just have to see. If there's technical difficulties, I apologize. So can't wait to hear your responses and see what you've learned about how a hurricane is formed. Please summarize page 324 and 325, and we will look at the rest tomorrow. Have a great day. I will see you all at 3 o'clock at our Zoom meeting. Mr. Berry posted on our class story the access code so you can log in and join us today.